During a deadly snowstorm in rural Wyoming, elderly diner owner Elena Bishop quietly counted her last $80 with just 7 days left before the bank would take everything. As the wind howled outside her nearly empty Prairie Rose diner, 15 battered bikers from the Crimson Wolves Motorcycle Club appeared, desperate for warmth. Without hesitation, she opened the door and served them her last meal. By morning, the thunder of over 100 motorcycles filled the lot, ready to repay the kindness that once saved their lives. Before we dive in, what time are you listening? Where are you from? Drop a comment below and tell me. Elena Bishop looked up from the cramped dining room of her Prairie Rose diner as the first flurry of snow swirled past the front window. A bitter wind had blown in off the Wyoming plains earlier that evening, and already drifts were building along the sidewalk outside. At 77 years old, Elena had lived alone in these parts for decades, ever since raising a family and losing her husband, George. Her small diner, a weathered wooden building painted faded green and red, had been her pride and joy ever since she and George first opened it. Inside, the diner was quiet that night. The few regulars had gone home early ahead of the coming blizzard. Elena wiped down the last cup of coffee on the counter with a rag. The humming neon sign above the door flashed open, but for almost an hour no one had walked through. The warmth of the radiator clunking in the corner was making her sleepy, but she stayed at her post. She had bills to pay and creditors waiting. Just last week the bank had threatened to take over the diner unless she made one more payment by the end of the month. She counted out the few bills left in the till only about $80. It was not nearly enough to save the only home she had left. Then the wind rattled the windows, and the overhead lights flickered as a jagged flash of lightning lit up the empty street outside. The storm had arrived sooner and with far more fury than the forecast had predicted. Inside the diner, Elena felt a sudden sense of unease, not about the debts this time, but about the weather. Just as she closed her eyes for a moment and shook out her tired limbs, a distant roar broke the eerie silence. Elena blinked. The sound was growing louder by the second. It was the unmistakable rumble of motorcycle engines, growing closer on the highway that ran past her little diner. The front door jingled. Elena looked up and saw a framed figure standing in the doorway, tall, heavily bundled in black leather, a broad helmet held in his hand. He was soaked with snow and shaking with cold. Evening, he rasped, "Sorry to bother you, but could we come in? The storm's caught us." His voice was gruff, but not unkind. Behind him, through the snowy glass, Elena could make out at least a dozen more motorbikes parked haphazardly on the side of the road, their riders waiting in the wind. Elena's heart skipped. Until that moment, she'd believed the road empty. Now it was lined with strangers. She hesitated only a second, then smoothly unlatched the door and stepped aside. "Right this way, gentlemen," she said, smiling quietly. "Come on in before you all freeze out there." Her voice was gentle, tinged with a motherly warmth. The men nodded their thanks and shuffled inside, filing into the diner. Their leather boots clomped on the tiled floor, a harsh contrast to her quiet cleaning. Suddenly the diner felt very full for the first time in ages. 15 bikers, broad, shouldered and tattooed, took up every chair at the checkered tables. They were a rough-looking bunch, burly and scarred, lips cracked from the cold, eyebrows furrowed as they caught their breath. But none of them said a mean word or made any sudden move. The storm seemed to have humbled them all. Elena noticed their club patches, black and gold, showing a snarling wolf's head, indicating they were members of the Crimson Wolves Motorcycle Club. 15 of you?" Elena asked, her voice calm and warm. "I can't imagine you're all from around here. Where were you headed?" The tall man, who had entered first, the obvious leader, removed his helmet. He had deep blue eyes and a bushy mustache. "Name's Jace," he said, offering a handshake that was strong as iron. We were out on a ride toward Devil's Staircase Pass. We thought we'd make it home before the storm, but it came up on us quick. We'll thank you for letting us warm up." He shook the snow off his helmet and hung it on a nearby rack. "Sorry to barge in like this, ma'am," Jace continued, nodding respectfully. "But we could use a hot meal right about now." Eleanor's heart warmed further at his manners. Noticing their hunger, she hurriedly asked, "What can I get you all? Coffee's on the pot. Soup or chili, anything you need." She stepped behind the counter to fetch bowls and a ladle. The men murmured among themselves, chilly breath fogging the warm air. Another rider named Ted, whose cheeks were as ruddy as winter berries, piped up, "Coffee sounds great, ma'am." Another, a stocky young man named Miles, added with a grin, "And maybe some of that apple pie, if you have it." She pointed to a sign that read "Home, made apple pie, $3, near the counter. Smiles of relief spread on their frozen faces as they leaned over stools to wait. Eleanor quickly ladled hot chili into bowls and poured coffee. Soon the clatter of spoons and slurping of soup filled the diner. The bikers were quieter than she expected, but when she brought out the bowls, a man named Dan said gruffly, "Ma'am, this chili is perfect." Eleanor laughed softly. "My kids used to fight over the last bowl of this recipe," she said, "but I've saved one just for company tonight." The men chuckled appreciatively, digging in. They traded small talk over coffee to keep from nodding off. Ted asked Eleanor about the towns up ahead. Jace joked with Miles about trying not to freeze. "Never seen weather like this so early," one of them muttered. After finishing a second cup, a younger rider named Hank glanced around and asked tentatively, "Ma'am, do you have any spare blankets? We're freezing out there." Eleanor's forehead creased. She cared for them like they were family now. The little heater had warmed everyone some, but the cold had seeped into their boots and bones. "I don't have more than I use myself," Eleanor explained quietly. "But I live just behind this diner. I have a living room with a sofa bed and a few quilts. If you need to crash, I can fix you up down there." She felt a flutter of worry offering her home to a bunch of scary bikers, but looked at their weary faces and nodded to herself. Jace's expression softened. "We won't be any trouble, ma'am," he assured her. "Just a hot meal and somewhere warm would mean the world. We'll leave before sunup, promise." 4 of the riders took her up on the offer, heading for her small apartment in the back with Jace. The rest settled in for the night around the tables. As they ate, Eleanor noticed their wallets out on the table skinny with only a few bills. Her own register drawer had only $80. Fear crept into her heart. These men had eaten enough to feed a family of 4. "Ma'am, how much do we owe you?" Jace asked gently after coffee and chili were cleared. He counted out 2 crumpled $5 bills from his pocket. Eleanor shook her head. "Don't worry about it," she said softly. "You've been through a storm and haven't eaten all day. Go home safe." Jace raised an eyebrow. "We appreciate that, ma'am, but we pay our debts," he said. "It's a matter of respect." He pulled out a few more bills. She hesitated, realizing he insisted. "All right." She relented quietly. Ted slid a $10 bill across the counter. Miles followed with another 5. Piece by piece, the bikers gathered 1 bill at a time, folding them carefully. Soon the table had a stack far larger than a simple meal cost. "Thank you," Jace said quietly as he collected them. "This is more than enough. Promise we'll pay you back someday." He looked at Eleanor with sincerity. She took the bills in trembling hands. It was a thick wad of money for a diner so small. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered, wiping her eyes. The men just shook their heads. Outside, the wind still howled. It was clear these bikers wouldn't be leaving tonight. They helped Eleanor close the diner. Jace flipped the closed sign and locked the door against the cold. "Night, Miss Bishop," he said as he offered his hand one more time. "We're forever in your debt." she watched them disappear into the darkness. In the little apartment behind the diner, Elinor spread out quilts and blankets on the sofa bed. The men drifted in quietly, mud on their boots and smiles on their faces. Jace, Ted, Miles, and Dan each thanked her again. "Sleep tight," she said. "I'll be up at dawn with coffee." The storm raged all night outside, but inside Elinor's home, the warmth of kindness kept them safe. Morning arrived clear and blue. Elinor stepped outside to shovel snow from the entrance. Sunshine glinted off fresh drifts. She paused to catch her breath and nearly dropped her shovel in shock. Down the stretch of highway stood an unbelievable sight. More than 100 motorcycles were lined in the snow like sentinels. Chrome and paint jobs glittered as far as she could see. A wave of awe washed over her. Suddenly the diner door burst open, and one biker after another stepped inside, many still wearing caps instead of helmets. Jace led the way, a proud smile on his face. "Good morning, Miss Bishop," he said, removing his hat and bowing slightly. "I told you we'd see you again." Elinor stood still, mouth hanging open. Jace's grin grew wider. "We heard how close you were to losing this place," he said. "Well, last night we all talked. We decided we'd take care of it." Before she could speak, another rider placed a large envelope on the counter. Inside were checks and cash, everything needed to cover the mortgage, plus a bit extra to fix up the diner. One by one, each biker came up to shake her hand. Ted handed her a note. It read, "For saving us, we stand with you always, the Crimson Wolves." The envelope smelled faintly of pine, like winter itself. Then the bikers bustled around the diner, acting like old friends. A few repaired a leaky faucet with toolboxes in hand. Others stacked wood in the heater. One tall man even held a floorboard while his partner tightened a bolt on the stove. The diner filled with the sound of hammers and laughter, a symphony of genuine care. At last Jace gathered everyone near the door. The group, over 100 strong now, leather and denim jackets all, tipped their hats to her. "We're proud to have you on our honor roll, Miss Bishop," Jace said. "What you did for 15 of us, well, it meant a lot. Don't you ever doubt that." He nodded firmly. Elinor looked around at the place that could have been lost, now abuzz with life. Tears brimmed in her eyes. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. They all just laughed softly, clapping her on the shoulders. One tough-looking biker with gentle eyes added softly, "Say we're family now." Others grinned in agreement. "You are," Jace said, giving her a hug. "We're family." That night, Elinor sat by the fire in her kitchen, the lantern light dancing on the walls. The eviction notice was gone, replaced by a bright new sign, "Open." Outside, the Wyoming night was silent beneath the stars. And along the highway, 100 silent bikes sat parked side by side, guardians of this remote spot, silent proof of an unbreakable promise and the strength of kindness.